Welcome to another movie plot. Spoilers ahead. The threat of war between USA and Russia is at an all-time high. A nuclear submarine called the USS Montana is on a mission near an underwater trench known as the Cayman Trough. The crew encounter an unidentified submerged object moving towards them at an incredible speed. The glowing object passes over the submarine and the vessel loses all of its power. When it leaves, power restores, but the submarine is off course, veering into a canyon wall and throwing off their trajectory. With no other option, an officer is able to launch the sub's emergency beacon just before the sub collides head-on with another rock, flooding the ship as the crew sink to the ocean floor. With Soviets in the area attempting to salvage the vessel and its missiles, the Americans decide to send in Navy SEALs to a nearby underwater oil drilling platform called the Deep Core, designed and engineered by Dr. Lindsay Brigman. It will be used as their base of operations for the mission. Deep below them is her estranged husband and the rig's foreman Virgil Bud Brigman, who receives a call from a general about the mission, but Bud is skeptical as his crew aren't soldiers, but being promised a substantial bonus, the rest are all overjoyed, even with the news of Hurricane Frederick rolling in. The submerged mining rig is towed by a mini submarine operated by Lisa One Night Standing, while itself towing along its parent ship on the surface, the Benthic Explorer. Bud receives a call from Lindsay, furious at the notion that her rig is being commandeered for the mission. However, the rig's financier Benthic Petroleum has already agreed to cooperate, and Bud does what he's told, while being silently judged by Alan Hippie Carnes. Lindsay travels down herself in a mini submarine with the SEAL team and are required to sit for 8 hours in a compression chamber. The SEAL team leader Lieutenant Hiram Coffey insists that they have had all the underwater training required of them, while outside the chamber Catfish shows Hippie the hammer, but Jammer isn't impressed. They finally emerge from the chamber, however no one notices that Coffey has developed high-pressure nervous syndrome. The two biggest personalities argue like usual, with Lindsay having joined them on this mission as she knows more about the rig's logistics than anyone. Bud feels she has always had more invested in this place than she ever did their relationship, so he gets mad and throws his wedding ring into a toilet, retrieving it back out when he cools down. The teams prepare to investigate the submarine wreck while Coffey himself leads the entire operation, demanding orders and angrily reprimanding the roughneck crew when they begin joking with each other. Another one of the SEALs named Monk shows Hippie and Catfish a high-tech underwater breathing system that uses oxygenated fluid instead of air, using Hippie's pet rat as a demonstration. It fills the wearer's lungs with water, allowing them to breathe at extreme ocean depths. The crew descend to the wreckage with Lindsay piloting one of the rig's 3 mini-subs. She comes across the giant propeller of the submarine and hovers above a midship hatch, allowing the divers to gain access, as Hippie assists them with one of the rig's remote observation vehicles. Noticing the missile hatches, Lindsay asks Coffer how many there are inside, which he replies with 192, all 5 times larger than Hiroshima. They gain access through the side of the sub and begin searching for survivors, finding nothing but flooded compartments with dead sailors. While searching compartments on the Montana, Bud keeps his crew from freaking out with the reminder of their bonus. But when left alone for a moment, Jammer sees a strange glowing creature and panics, damaging his breathing apparatus. Bud returns to find him unresponsive and convulsing, but the riggers are able to save their friend, although leaving him in a coma. Lindsay experiences the same power loss that the Montana did, before encountering the same strange unidentifiable creature that caused the submarine to sink, which just looks at her and descends even deeper. When the crew are all back on board the rig, Lindsay says that she doesn't know what she saw, but she doesn't think it was a Russian submarine, like Coffer communicates back to his commanding officer on the surface. The officer tells them that a Russian attack sub was detected in the area and orders them to retrieve a Trident missile warhead from the Montana, arming it as a contingency in case the Russians get too close. As the hurricane rolls in, Coffey and the SEALs take the rig's largest mini-sub without authorization. Using the sub's large mechanized arm, they are able to open a launch door of the Montana and extract one of the Trident's missiles. However, the large mini-sub is the only vehicle capable of disconnecting the station's umbilical cord to the Explorer. So upon their return, One Night is forced to quickly attempt disconnecting the umbilicus, while the SEALs secure their warhead. But by this time the Explorer is being tossed violently by the powerful storm, making it impossible for One Night to disconnect the cable. It begins to pull the mining rig with such force that it drags the station along the bottom towards the Cayman Trough. But luckily, as they approach the drop-off, the station catches on some outcropping, stopping it in its tracks. Though the stress on the Explorer causes its crane to break away from the ship and sink to the bottom. Bud gives the order to brace for the impact as the umbilical begins to reach the rig, before the crane crashes down to the ocean floor, just managing to miss them. Relieved that the crane didn't hit the rig, it soon rolls into the chasm, jerking the rig into the floor, causing massive damage and flooding some compartments. Hippie manages to save his bagged rat from being crushed by the submarine in the moon pool. But one of the SEALs isn't so lucky. Lou Findler attempts to save some of the station's crew trapped inside a flooded compartment, but the hatch closes and Bud is forced to watch them all drown. Bud is only saved from the same flooding when his wedding ring prevents a door from closing completely, and he's rescued by Catfish and Sunny. Things calm down and the crew begin repairs, with tensions towards the SEALs intensifying over the deaths of their friends and colleagues. Lindsay ventures out into the water to activate some O2 tanks, but the electronics begin to experience more strange fluctuations from what appears to be the same underwater beings. The small one from the submarine checks her out for a bit, deeming her a non-threat, and then a much larger illuminated vehicle reveals itself, allowing her to touch it. As both take off out of sight into the chasm below, she is able to take a few pictures of them before the power comes back on. Lindsay shows the pictures to the crew, which most don't seem to believe, and she dubs the entities as non-terrestrial intelligence. Bud takes her aside thinking she may have hallucinated the NTIs, but she assures him that she isn't suffering from the pressure sickness like Coffee. But he still doesn't believe her. Hippie uses the ROF to spy on the SEALs, where Coffee and one of his men are rigging a detonator to the warhead. While showing the footage to Bud, Lindsay overhears them and marches to Coffee's quarters, pounding on the hatch until he opens the door. She demands him to take the nuke off the rig, but Coffee seems very anxious and orders her out of the room, but the crew have now noticed he is suffering from the shakes. Cut off with contact from his general on the surface due to the storm, a cracking Coffee is beginning to lose it. While the crew wind down after a hard day, a tentacle made entirely of water enters the rig. It comes across Lindsay and the whole crew, including Bud, is finally convinced of its existence. It morphs into faces. Lindsay pulls in an apparent attempt to communicate, then takes off to another room to briefly inspect the warhead. But when Coffee finds the tentacle's base in the moon pool, he panics and closes one of the hatches, turning the forward half back into water, and the remainder looks at him then retreats back into the depths. With Coffee deeming the NTI as hostile, he convinces SEAL Shonik to aid him in taking control of the rig. Hippie discovers them secretly strapping the warhead to another ROV, intending to send it down to where the NTIs appear to be coming from. So Coffee forces the rig crew and Lindsay into the rig's kitchen and lock them in, leaving Shonik behind to keep them from escaping while Monk tries to talk them out of it. Lindsay tries to reason with them through the door when suddenly it opens and Jammer appears, having come out of his coma and knocked out Shonik. Meanwhile, Coffee heads to the sub bay and jams the door closed. Not able to get through the locked door, Bud and Catfish go through a hatch to the outside and swim to the sub bay under the rig in freezing cold. Bud leaves Catfish behind at another hatch to catch his breath and makes his way to the moon pool, where Coffee is sitting down unaware. Bud has second thoughts about bludgeoning him with a pole and tries to grab Coffee's pistol but is spotted. He tries to shoot Bud point blank, but the pistol is empty, having been previously unloaded by the forward-thinking Monk. Bud and Coffee fight in melee combat, with Coffee eventually gaining the upper hand and choking Bud. But Cat appears and introduces the Navy SEAL to the Hammer, wanting to do that all day. Coffee retreats to the sub and escapes the moon pool with the intent of launching the missile. While Catfish takes shots at the rogue SEAL, Bud puts on a diving suit and goes after him, tying a rope from the ROV to a railing on the rig. Coffee attempts to crush Bud with the submarine, but Lindsay, piloting one of the rig's smaller subs, crashes into him head-on, and manages to get Bud inside. But while trying to stop the missile from getting away from the rig, Coffee comes back, crashing into them and letting the warhead escape. During an intense chase between the submarines, Lindsay kicks up some dust, blurring Coffee's vision, then blindsides him into the side of a cliff, destroying both crafts and leaving the larger one dangling from the trench. A trapped Coffee falls off the edge of the trough and is crushed within his submersible by the pressure. Trapped in their rapidly flooding sub and with only one diving suit to swim back to the platform, Lindsay suggests that she will drown herself, hoping the cold water will preserve her via hypothermia until she can be resuscitated. So she does so, and Bud swims back to the rig with Lindsay in tow, alerting the rest of the crew to the situation. Arriving back at the moon pool, the whole crew begin working to save her life. When emergency equipment fails, Bud, not wanting to give up, begins slapping and shaking Lindsay, which eventually works. The team come up with a plan to fill Bud's lungs with the oxygenated fluid, enabling him to reach incredible depths without injury, since his body will have liquid in his lungs rather than gas. Bud goes to the edge of the trench and jumps in, 2 miles down and deeper than anyone has ever gone before. Talking to the crew through text, the drop takes a significant amount of time and the pressure begins to affect him, eventually even busting the ROV he uses as a guide to reach the bottom. Tumbling down for a little while, he regains control and reaches the missile on the side of the cliff face. But his glow stick makes it impossible to determine the color of the wire he has to cut on the missile. He chances it and manages to get the right one, But with only 5 minutes left of oxygen, he finds that he doesn't have enough to make it back to the rig. Lindsay becomes distressed, but Bud tells her that he always knew it was a one-way trip. His final message to her says that he loves her and still considers her to be his wife. She tells him she loves him back before losing contact. Accepting his fate, Bud is discovered dying by one of the beings, now no longer in one of their vehicles and in full view for all to see. It takes him deeper into the trench to an immense glowing city hidden on the floor of the ocean, their spaceship. They take him to a room where they remove the water and normalize pressure. They play back Bud's compassionate messages to his wife and acknowledge his bravery for his sacrifice. Bud is shown projections of humanity's destructive behavior, and the NTIs are using their waterbending to form giant tsunamis all over Earth, threatening to destroy us. He asks what right they have to judge the human race, but they retort with historical clips of war and genocide. Fair play. However, seeing Bud's transmission to his wife and his selflessness to save everyone at the cost of his own life, the NTIs realize that humans do possess compassion for each other and decide to spare them. Back on the rig, Bud's friends are sitting around upset waiting to be rescued, when suddenly they get a message from Bud telling them that he's alive, and has made some new friends. The rig begins to shake as the entire alien craft rises from the chasm, lifting the deep core and surrounding naval fleet right out of the water. The underwater crew emerge from a hatch atop the alien city, realizing that they should have died without decompressing and that the NTIs must have done something to them. Bud walks out of the spaceship a hero and approaches his wife, where they engage in a passionate kiss. And the movie ends. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more.